Sometimes the most ordinary mornings can flip in an instant. A Black DEA agent walked into a Charlotte lobby, ready for a routine briefing. But a receptionist's call brought 2 officers who saw him as a threat. For 10 minutes, the wrong story was written about who he was, until the truth crashed down like a hammer. Want to know what changed everything? Before we reveal the twists in this unbelievable story, get comfortable, relax, hit like, and subscribe so you never miss the next one. It was a Wednesday morning, just past 9:30, in October 2024. The lobby of Parkview Tower in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina, was the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. Gleaming marble floors stretched out under soft fluorescent lights. Rows of dark leather armchairs sat empty, their cushions barely touched, flanked by fake ferns stuffed into heavy ceramic pots. A faint breeze from the air conditioning kept the room at a crisp 65 degrees Fahrenheit, carrying the clean scent of floor polish. Behind the reception desk, a woman typed with the steady rhythm of someone who'd done it for years, her eyes glued to the screen, her coffee mug untouched. Most days, people drifted in and out without a second glance. Business suits, briefcases, quiet footsteps, nothing to notice, nothing to say. But today, a single look would turn a routine morning into something else entirely. Daniel Carter pushed through the glass double doors with the calm confidence of a man who'd walked this path 1,000 times. At 40, he carried the weight of 15 years as a DEA special agent, his record stacked with commendations for dismantling drug rings across the Southeast. His dark suit was sharp, the kind you'd expect from someone who spent his days in courtrooms or briefing rooms. A black laptop bag hung over one shoulder, its strap worn but sturdy. His posture was straight, alert, but not stiff, like a man who knew exactly where he was headed. As he crossed the lobby, he nodded politely to the security guard stationed near the entrance, a guy in his 60s with a clipboard and a tired expression. No nod came back. Daniel didn't let it bother him. He'd seen that look before, the one that didn't quite meet your eyes. He stopped about 5 feet from the building directory, a sleek metal panel listing offices from floors 2 to 20. Pulling out his phone, he scrolled through emails, a Bluetooth earpiece blinking faintly in his right ear. He spoke softly, his voice low enough that no one could catch the words. "Files are ready. I'll be up in 10. To anyone passing by, he was just another guy getting ready for a meeting, maybe a lawyer or an executive. But not to Karen Wells. Karen, 50, had worked the reception desk at Parkview for nearly a decade. She liked the job for its predictability. Check IDs, sign visitors in, keep the lobby tidy. But she also prided herself on noticing things others missed. A package left too long, a stranger lingering near the elevators. Today, her eyes landed on Daniel. He stood alone, dressed in dark clothes, talking to himself through that earpiece. She squinted, leaning slightly over the counter to get a better look. Was he pacing? No, not really, but he shifted his weight once or twice. Was he looking around too much? Maybe. Her mind started piecing things together, and the pieces didn't fit right. She didn't know Daniel was a DEA agent. She didn't know he was there to meet with a cybersecurity firm about a drug trafficking case. She didn't ask. Instead, she reached for the phone, her fingers hesitating for just a second before dialing building security. "Hey," she said, keeping her voice low. "There's a man in the lobby. Not sure what he's doing. He's just standing there, talking to himself. Looks suspicious." She hung up, her arms folding tightly across her chest. From her spot behind the desk, she watched Daniel, her lips pressed into a thin line. She told herself she was being careful, doing her job. But being careful could mean different things to different people. Upstairs, on the 10th floor, Laura Mitchell, Daniel's supervisor, was wrapping up a call in a glass-walled office. A 20-year DEA veteran, she was expecting Daniel for a briefing that could crack open a major case. She glanced at her watch, unaware that a single phone call had just set something in motion. Downstairs, Daniel stood near the directory, still scrolling, still speaking quietly into his earpiece. He had no idea that Karen's words, suspicious, standing there, alone, were about to change the next 10 minutes of his life. The lobby stayed quiet, but the air felt heavier now, like the moment before a storm. Across town, in a patrol car parked outside a coffee shop, the radio crackled to life. Suspicious person at Parkview Tower, male, black, late 30s, standing in the lobby, possibly scoping the place. The voice was calm, routine, but it was enough to make Officer Mark Thompson set down his coffee. At 38, with 10 years on the Charlotte PD, he treated every call like it could be the one that mattered. He'd applied to join the DEA a month ago, dreaming of bigger cases, bigger impact. His partner, Officer Susan Hayes, 35, was quieter. Her 8 years on the force teaching her to watch and think before moving. She adjusted her body cam, the red light blinking on. "Could be nothing," she said, buckling her seatbelt, as Thompson started the engine. He didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the road. The morning traffic was light, and within 10 minutes their cruiser pulled into the lot at Parkview Tower, tires crunching on loose gravel. The building loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the gray October sky. Thompson's hand rested on his belt as he stepped out, Hayes close behind. They didn't know it yet, but the vague call they'd just received was about to spiral into something none of them expected. Inside the lobby, Daniel Carter stood near the directory, about 5 feet from the wall, his phone glowing with a case file. He spoke softly into his Bluetooth earpiece, confirming details with a colleague. "Yeah, the data's lined up. I'll brief them soon." His dark suit was still crisp, his laptop bag resting lightly on his shoulder. The lobby was quiet, the only sounds the faint hum of the air conditioning and the occasional tap of Karen Wells' keyboard behind the reception desk. Karen watched him from the corner of her eye, her arms still folded, her earlier call to security now a weight she couldn't shake. She hadn't expected things to move this fast. When the glass doors swung open and 2 uniformed officers stepped in, her stomach tightened. She gripped the edge of the counter, her fingers cold against the wood. Daniel didn't notice the doors open. He was too focused, scrolling through a chart of shipping routes tied to his case. "Sir, can we talk to you for a moment?" Thompson's voice cut through the stillness, sharp and clear. Daniel looked up, his eyebrows lifting slightly. He pulled out his earpiece, letting it dangle in his hand. "Sure," he said, his tone even. "What's this about?" "Step away from the wall. Hands where we can see them," Thompson said, his stance wide, his voice carrying the kind of authority that didn't invite questions. Daniel blinked, caught off guard. The lobby, already too quiet, seemed to shrink. He shifted his weight, his mind racing to piece together what was happening. "I'm with the DEA," he said calmly. "I'm here for a meeting on the 10th floor." "DEA?" Thompson's eyes narrowed, his hand hovering near his holster. "Got ID to prove that?" "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice steady but laced with a hint of frustration. He gestured toward his laptop bag. "It's in the side pocket. I can grab it." "Sir, don't reach!" Thompson snapped, his tone sharper now. Daniel froze, his hand stopping mid-air. The air in the lobby thickened, every sound amplified. The faint creak of Hayes' boots, the soft rustle of Karen's sleeve as she shifted behind the desk. Karen's face paled, her eyes darting between Daniel and the officers. She hadn't meant for this. She'd just wanted someone to check, to be sure. But now, with 2 cops staring down a man who hadn't done anything, she felt a knot in her chest. She didn't say a word. Hayes stepped forward, her movement slower, her eyes scanning Daniel's face. "Can you set the bag down and open it slowly?" she asked, her voice softer than Thompson's but still firm. Daniel nodded, kneeling carefully to place the bag on the marble floor. He unzipped it, his hands deliberate, visible. "My badge is in the side pocket," he said. "You can take it out if you want. My name's Daniel Carter, badge number 48312. I'm a special agent with the DEA. You can call Agent Laura Mitchell at the Charlotte office to verify. Thompson didn't move towards the bag. His jaw clenched, like he was waiting for a reason to doubt. "Are you armed?" he asked, his voice low but pointed. "Yes," Daniel said, keeping his eyes on Thompson. "DEA-issued Glock 22, concealed on my right hip, fully authorized. Like I said, my credentials are in the bag." Thompson's hand stayed near his holster, his posture rigid. Hayes glanced at him, then at the bag, but didn't reach for it either. Karen, still behind the desk, shifted her weight, her fingers twisting around a pen. She wanted to say something. Maybe that she'd made a mistake. Maybe that she didn't mean for it to go this far. But the words wouldn't come. Her call had been vague, just enough to raise flags, not enough to explain why. And now, here they were. "Sir, sit on the floor, hands where we can see them," Thompson said, his voice louder now, echoing off the marble. Daniel exhaled, a slow, controlled breath. He lowered himself to the tile, his palms flat against the cold surface. His suit jacket bunched slightly at the shoulders, but he kept his movements smooth, deliberate. His eyes flicked between the officers, tracking their hands, their stances, the way Thompson's fingers twitched near his belt. He wasn't scared, not exactly, but he knew how fast things could go wrong. He'd seen it before, lived it before. 10 years ago, in a different city, a different lobby, it had been a traffic stop. Same look, same tone. He'd made it through then. He'd make it through now. Hayes stood a few feet back, her expression harder to read. She glanced at Karen, who was staring at the floor now, her face flushed. The receptionist hadn't said anything since the officers arrived, hadn't explained what she'd seen or why she'd called. Hayes' eyes lingered on her for a second, then returned to Daniel. She wanted to check the badge, to call the number he'd given, but Thompson was leading, and she followed. That's how it worked. At least, that's how it had worked until now. Upstairs, on the 10th floor, Laura Mitchell checked her watch again. The briefing was supposed to start soon, and Daniel was never late. She tapped her pen against her portfolio, unaware that downstairs, 2 officers were standing over her best agent, their hands too close to their weapons, their questions too far from the truth. The elevator hummed faintly in the distance, its cables shifting. Someone was about to step into the lobby, and when they did, everything would change. The elevator doors slid open with a soft ding, and Laura Mitchell stepped into the lobby of Parkview Tower. At 45, she carried the quiet authority of 20 years with the DEA, her navy blazer pressed, her badge clipped to her belt, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. A thermos of coffee steamed faintly in her other hand, her red hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was ready for a briefing on a drug trafficking case, not a confrontation. But when her eyes landed on Daniel Carter sitting on the cold marble floor, his palms flat, 2 officers looming over him with hands near their holsters, she stopped dead. The lobby, already tense, seemed to hold its breath. Laura's gaze sharpened, taking in every detail. Daniel's open laptop bag, the untouched badge inside, the way Officer Mark Thompson stood too close, his jaw tight. "What is going on here?" Her voice cut through the silence, calm but heavy, like a judge calling order. Daniel didn't move, his eyes flicking up to meet hers. "Morning, Laura," he said, his tone steady, almost dry, despite the weight of the moment. He stayed where he was, palms still flat, his dark suit wrinkled at the knees from the tile. Laura stepped forward, her heels clicking softly, her portfolio shifting to her other arm. "Why is my lead agent on the floor?" she asked, her eyes locking onto Thompson. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Every word landed like a stone. Thompson hesitated, his hand dropping an inch from his holster. "Ma'am, we got a call about a suspicious person in the lobby," he said, his tone defensive but wavering. "He said he's armed, so we followed protocol." Laura's eyes narrowed. She glanced at the open bag, the badge case clearly visible in the side pocket, then back at Thompson. "You've got his bag right there," she said. "His credentials are in plain sight. So I'll ask again, why is he on the floor?" Officer Susan Hayes stepped forward, her voice quieter, almost apologetic. "Ma'am, the caller said he was acting strangely, standing alone, talking into an earpiece. We were told he might be scoping the place." Laura's gaze shifted to Hayes, then to Karen Wells, who stood frozen behind the reception desk, her face pale, her hands twisting a pen like it might anchor her. Karen hadn't said a word since the officers arrived, hadn't explained her call or why she'd dialed security without asking a single question. Laura's eyes lingered on her for a moment, then returned to the officers. "Did he resist?" she asked. "No," Hayes said, her voice low. "Did he threaten anyone?" Laura pressed. "No," Hayes admitted, her eyes flicking to the floor. Laura's jaw tightened. "So you saw a black man in a suit, standing 5 feet from a directory, and your first move was to put him on the ground?" Her words were measured, but they carried an edge that made Thompson shift his weight. He didn't answer. Daniel stood slowly, brushing off his pants with deliberate care. 10 minutes, he said, his voice low but clear, echoing across the marble. 10 minutes I sat here while they decided if I was a threat or not. His eyes moved from Thompson to Hayes, then briefly to Karen, who looked away, her face flushed with something between shame and fear. Laura turned to Thompson, her expression unyielding. "Before I came down, Agent Carter reviewed a transfer application for the DA. Officer Mark Thompson. That's you, isn't it?" Thompson's face went still, like he'd been hit with something he didn't see coming. "Ma'am?" he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You applied," Laura said, her tone flat but piercing. 10 years with Charlotte PD. A commendation for a drug bust in 2023. Solid file. Daniel flagged it for an interview this morning. Thought you had the instincts to make it." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And now here we are." The lobby was silent, the air heavy with the weight of her words. Hayes glanced at her partner, her expression unreadable but tense. Karen's hands stopped moving, the pen falling softly onto the counter. She looked like she wanted to disappear, her earlier certainty crumbling under the reality of what she'd set in motion. Daniel adjusted his bag on his shoulder, his eyes steady on Thompson. "You could have asked my name," he said, nodding toward the directory, its metal surface gleaming 10 feet away. "It's right there. Would have saved us all some time." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. No words came. Her call had been a reflex, a moment of unease she hadn't questioned. Now, with Daniel standing tall, his badge untouched but his authority undeniable, she felt the full weight of her mistake. Laura handed Hayes a business card, her fingers steady. "My number's on there if you need to confirm who he is, but let me save you the trouble. Daniel's been with the DEA 15 years. I've worked with him for 8. His record's cleaner than most agents get in a lifetime." Daniel met her eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. "We still doing the briefing?" he asked. "Yeah," Laura said, her voice softening for the first time. "Let's go." They turned toward the elevator, but Daniel paused, his gaze settling on Thompson. 10 minutes, he said again, quieter now, but no less heavy. That's all it took to turn a meeting into something else. His words hung in the air, a challenge and a truth rolled into one. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside. As the doors began to close, the lobby stayed silent, but the weight of those 10 minutes lingered, pressing down on everyone left behind. The elevator doors closed with a soft thud, sealing Daniel Carter and Laura Mitchell inside. The hum of the machinery filled the silence as the car climbed to the 10th floor of Parkview Tower. Daniel adjusted the strap of his laptop bag, his face composed but his shoulders carrying a weight that hadn't been there at 9:30 that morning. Laura glanced at him, her thermos of coffee still warm in her hand. She didn't say anything, but her eyes asked the question. Daniel met her gaze and gave a small nod. He was fine, or at least he would be. Downstairs, the lobby of Parkview Tower felt like a different world. The marble floors still gleamed, the leather armchairs sat untouched, but the air was thick with what had just happened. Officer Mark Thompson stood near the directory, his hands on his hips, staring at the spot where Daniel had sat minutes ago. Officer Susan Hayes lingered a few feet away, her body cam off now, her expression caught between regret and resolve. Karen Wells, behind the reception desk, had busied herself with papers, her movements jerky, her face pale. She hadn't spoken since the elevator doors closed, but her silence said enough. Upstairs, Daniel and Laura stepped into a glass-walled conference room, the Charlotte skyline visible through tall windows. The cybersecurity team was already there, setting up a projector, their laptops open to charts and timelines. Daniel connected his device, pulling up files on a drug trafficking network that stretched from Miami to Raleigh. He moved with the same precision he always did, his voice steady as he greeted the team. "Morning, everyone. Let's get started." But there was a tiredness in his eyes, a shadow from the 10 minutes downstairs that no one in the room could see. Laura took a seat near the head of the table, her portfolio open, her pen tapping lightly against the paper. She watched Daniel, ready to step in if he needed her, but he didn't. He never did. The briefing went smoothly, the team nodding as Daniel walked them through shipping routes and encrypted communications. Business as usual, at least on the surface. Downstairs, Thompson finally moved, his boots scuffing softly against the marble. He turned to Hayes, his voice low. "I thought I was doing my job," he said almost to himself. Hayes nodded, but her eyes were on the elevator. "We both did," she said. "Once. But we got it wrong." Thompson didn't answer. He'd wanted the DEA to be his next step, a chance to do more, to be more. Now the application he'd spent weeks perfecting felt like a weight in his chest. Karen, still at the desk, glanced up briefly, then looked away. She'd slipped back to her computer, her screen glowing with emails she wasn't reading. The pen she'd been twisting earlier lay abandoned on the counter. She wanted to say something, maybe to the officers, maybe to herself, but the moment had passed. An hour later, the briefing wrapped. Daniel shook hands with the cybersecurity team, his smile professional, his voice calm. "We'll follow up next week," he said, closing his laptop. The team filed out, leaving him and Laura alone. She handed him her car keys, her badge catching the light. "Want me to walk down with you?" she asked, her tone softer now, almost maternal. "I got it," Daniel said, slipping the keys into his pocket. His voice was steady, but there was a weariness in it, the kind that came from carrying moments like this for years. Laura hesitated, then nodded. "Call me later." He gave her a small nod and headed for the elevator. The ride down was quiet, just the hum of cables and the glow of floor numbers ticking by. 10, 9, 8. When the doors opened, Daniel expected an empty lobby. But Susan Hayes was still there, leaning against a column near the directory, her arms crossed, her uniform looking less like armor now. She straightened when she saw him, her expression open, unguarded. "Agent Carter," she said, stepping forward. Daniel paused, his bag over his shoulder. "Officer Hayes," he said, his tone neutral but curious. "I stayed because I needed to say something," Hayes began, her voice steady but low. "I saw your badge in the bag. I heard you give your badge number, your supervisor's name. I knew you were telling the truth, but I stood there and let it play out. I didn't push back. I didn't ask Thompson to check your ID. I'm sorry." Daniel studied her, his eyes searching her face. She wasn't performing, wasn't trying to save face. There was no badge to flash now, just a woman owning her mistake. "Why say it now?" he asked, his voice calm but direct. "Because I don't want to be someone who sees what's right too late and walks away," Hayes said. I've been on this job 8 years. I thought I knew what bias looked like. I didn't think it could look like me." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression softening just a fraction. "Apologies don't erase what happened," he said. "They don't undo 10 minutes of being treated like a stranger in a place you belong. But saying it out loud, that's where it starts. Most people don't even get that far." Hayes managed a faint smile, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Think Thompson's got a shot at the DEA?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "If he's honest with himself," Daniel said. "We don't need people who carry power without questioning how they use it." He paused, then added, "Tell him the interview's still on, but he's got work to do." Hayes nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I will." Daniel turned toward the glass doors, the October air waiting outside. But as he crossed the lobby, he felt the weight of Karen's gaze. She was still behind the desk, her hands frozen over her keyboard, her face a mix of regret and something she couldn't name. She opened her mouth, like she might say something, but no words came. Daniel didn't stop. He'd seen that look before. Guilt that wanted to speak, but didn't know how. He pushed through the doors, the cool air hitting his face, about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, carrying the faint smell of wet pavement. Outside, the parking lot stretched out, half empty, the Charlotte skyline rising in the distance. Daniel's car was parked 50 feet away, its black paint gleaming under the gray sky. But as he crossed the lot, he saw a figure leaning against a patrol cruiser, arms folded, uniform catching the light. Mark Thompson straightened when he saw Daniel, his face tense but open, like a man who'd been waiting for this moment. Daniel slowed, his keys in hand, curiosity pulling him closer. "Waiting for something?" he asked, his voice steady, neither warm nor cold. Thompson shook his head. "Didn't want to leave like this," he said, his voice low, almost hoarse. "I thought I was doing my job. I thought I was the guy who didn't let things like this happen. Now I'm not so sure." Daniel let the silence hang, his eyes steady on Thompson. "And now?" he asked. Thompson looked at him, his throat moving. "Now I think I've been lucky," he said. "Lucky no one called me out until today." Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. "In the DEA we study patterns," he said. "Choices people don't even know they're making, but we're not immune to them either. None of us are." Thompson's shoulders sagged slightly. "I messed up." "Yeah," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. "You did. But this isn't about your ego. It's about whether you'll learn something and keep going." He reached into his bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "Take this." Thompson took it, unfolding it slowly. His eyes scanned the page. Questions, scenarios, notes in tight handwriting. "What's this?" he asked. "Prep for your DEA interview," Daniel said. "Real cases, real questions. Use it or don't. Your call." Thompson's hand tightened around the paper, his voice catching. "Why give me this? After everything?" Daniel met his eyes. "Because I've been where you are," he said. "Not in your uniform, but in moments where I had to decide who I was going to be. You've got a chance to figure that out. Don't waste it." He turned and walked toward his car, the keys glinting in his hand. Thompson stood alone, the paper heavy in his grip, a mirror he wasn't ready to look into, but couldn't ignore. Daniel Carter pushed through the glass doors of Parkview Tower, stepping into the cool October air. The Charlotte parking lot stretched out before him, its asphalt damp from a morning drizzle, the skyline rising sharp against a gray sky. His car sat 50 feet away, a black sedan that blended into the row of vehicles. The weight of the last hour clung to him, not heavy enough to stop him, but enough to make each step feel deliberate. At 40, he'd carried moments like this before, moments where a glance, a call, a uniform turned him into a stranger. But today, as he crossed the lot, there was something else, a quiet resolve, a pride in walking away whole, unbroken. He'd faced the test and come through, not just for himself, but for everyone watching, everyone who'd ever stood in his shoes. Behind him, the lobby faded, its marble floors and fake ferns a memory. Karen Wells was still at her desk, her silence louder than any apology she might have offered. Officers Thompson and Hayes were somewhere inside, grappling with their own truths. Daniel didn't look back. He'd said what needed saying, given what he could. The rest was up to them. As he reached his car, the keys jingled softly in his hand. He unlocked the door, slid inside, and let out a slow breath. The dashboard clock read 10:45. 10 minutes in a lobby, an hour in a briefing, a lifetime in lessons. He started the engine, the hum steady, familiar. This is what stays with you, he thought. Not the shouting matches or the headlines, but the quiet moments where you choose who you are. For middle-aged folks who've seen the world change, for older ones who've lived through its storms, stories like this hit deep. They remind us that bias isn't always loud or obvious. It's a glance, a phone call, a hand too close to a holster. But change starts when we face it, when we own our mistakes, when we listen, when we act. Daniel's story isn't just his. It's a call to look harder, to ask better, to be better. He pulled out of the lot, the city unfolding ahead. We don't choose the challenges life hands us, he'd told himself once, years ago, after another day like this. Only how we meet them. Those words echoed now, a truth he carried like a badge. If this story makes you pause, makes you think about how you see others, how you judge, subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch more stories of resilience and truth that inspire us to be better. Hit that button, join our community, and let's keep these lessons alive together. Because 10 minutes can change a morning, but one honest moment can change everything.